ngazokhuluma ngani. Sawubona njani?
Check mic level.
Yeah, it's low. It's a bit low.
That's okay, so must
Yeah.
bring check mic levels.
Sorry.
Do you want to do this close?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
My name is David from Pimville, Soweto.
Check the mic level. Can you hear me?
Yeah, are you happy with it?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Johan.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Before we start, I just want to deal with something else, and then we will continue.
Please, as you.
You may be seated. Thank you. In the business day of Friday, the 4th of October 2009, an article appeared on the front page, which was titled, and I quote, "Zuma to get preview of nuke deal questions," close quotes. In that article, the Business Day said that the Commission had sent former President, Mr. Jacob Zuma, questions that he would be asked when he next appears in the Commission. It referred to the fact that prior to his appearance before the Commission last time, the former president had asked that he be finished with the questions that he would be asked once he was in the witness desk, on the witness stand, and that I, as chairperson, had made a decision to refuse that he be finished with questions in advance. The article goes on to say that the Commission had sent Mr. Zuma's lawyers 11 pages with 80 questions. When you read the whole article, it certainly gives the impression that the Commission has changed its decision on the question of whether Mr. Zuma should be finished questions before he, before he appears before the Commission. Since then, I think another newspaper has published the same article. The fact of the matter is, the Commission has not sent Mr. Zuma's lawyers any questions. There is a document which has 11 pages, and I saw that in the article there's a reference to 11 pages. There is a document with 11 pages that was sent by Mr. Paul Pretorius to counsel for Mr. Zuma. That document contains areas of interest in the various affidavits that had previously been given to Mr. Zuma as the affidavits from which questions would arise. That document was in accordance with the agreement that was reached on the 19th of July 2019, which was the last day of Mr. Zuma's appearance before the Commission that week. The terms of that agreement were announced publicly by myself. Counsel for Mr. Zuma and the head of the Commission's legal team, Mr. Pretorius, were asked after I had announced the terms to confirm whether those were the terms of the agreement. They stood up here in public and confirmed that those were the terms of the agreement. Anyone who listened to the terms of the agreement as I announced them, or anyone who wishes to listen to the recording of that day, will know that there was nothing to say Mr. Zuma would be sent questions. That same day, after the proceedings had been adjourned, some of the TV stations began to say in their reporting that the Commission was now going to send Mr. Zuma questions. And some of them were raising questions as to why he had not been given questions when he had asked for them before the hearing. Either the same day or the following day, but I believe the same day, the Commission issued a media statement clarifying this, that the terms of the agreement did not include that Mr. Zuma would be given questions in advance that he would be asked when he takes the witness stand. I am aware that one or more of the TV stations did correct and said, no, we got it wrong. The arrangement is not that he's going to be given questions. One would have thought that with that background, it would have been clear that the Commission still stood on the position that the former president would not be given questions in advance, that he would be asked once he takes the witness stand. Subsequent to me being aware of this article in the Business Day, I asked Mr. Paul Pretorius to please give me the document once again that he had sent to counsel for Mr. Zuma. And before that, he told me that there were no questions that he had sent. He gave me the document again, and I couldn't see any questions. All I could see was an indication of areas in various affidavits or incidents or events in which the legal team was saying they were interested so that he could deal with those issues in the affidavits contemplated in the agreement that I announced. I thought it's important that I set the record straight because I don't know why, on the basis of the document that we know, it is said that we have sent questions to Mr. Zuma, when a mere reading of the document will show that really there are no questions. I will cause that document to be released to the public, either today or the latest tomorrow, so that the public can see for itself that there were no questions that were sent. That's the 11-page document that I'm talking about. I don't know whether there might be an 11-page document elsewhere that has been manufactured by somebody else and has presented it to the media as coming from us, the Commission. But the 11-page doesn't indicate questions will, the actual questions. We appeal to the media to please just check their facts and to be fair to everybody, including the Commission. I spoke sometime earlier this year about an article that had been published by the Sunday Independent in regard to Mr. Nombembe, who is head of the Commission's investigation team, where in the article it was alleged that, or somebody had alleged that he had done certain things because he wanted to be appointed as NDPP. And I said then, I can't understand how any newspaper would publish that story when the editor must know, and I would have expected the journalist concerned to have known, that to be NDPP, you need to have at least a legal degree. And Mr. Nombembe doesn't have a legal degree, he's an auditor. But that was published. I think that the media must realize that when they don't check their facts properly, or when they do some things that are difficult to understand to the ordinary reader, that might give rise to all kinds of suspicions. And we don't need any unnecessary suspicions to be associated with the media. The media plays a very important role, and they need to be respected. Their rights need to be respected. Journalists do, generally speaking, a very good job. Society relies on them. We would like to be able to know that they do their job with the necessary professionalism. So we just ask that we be treated fairly as the Commission, just like we say everybody should be treated fairly. But in order to make sure that the side of the story of the Commission is known, arrangements will be made for us. We'll make arrangements to release the document that was sent to the lawyers for the former president, the only 11-page document that I know about that will be released. Thank you very much. We can now proceed.
Thank you, Justice. Mr. Zuma, may I just remind you, you're still under oath?
Yes,
From
you are
yesterday.
still under oath, Mr. Zuma. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Yes. Okay, all right.
Mr. Zuma, perhaps to commence the issues I wish to deal with exactly what the Deputy Chief Justice has been dealing with now, namely the press, and how things have been reported up to now concerning you as well. In the first place, the first point I wish to make is this. You were asked questions yesterday out of any discernible sequence, not that there's anything wrong with it, but you did not have the opportunity to actually explain your whole involvement in the meeting, how it came about, and what happened afterwards, and what happened during the course of the meeting in one narrative. You were asked questions, perhaps important questions, but in silos. And you did not have the opportunity to explain what had actually happened as one narrative. Now, those who are privy to the Commission documents would have read your affidavit, the affidavit that you prepared when you applied to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. And there the story is told in its extremity. But just perhaps also because this commission is conducted in public scrutiny, it is perhaps important for you, I would think, just at the beginning to give a very quick overview of how it came about that this meeting was organized, what the purpose of the meeting was, what your role and function was, and what happened afterwards.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and be quick, Chair. As I said...
Sorry, can I just say, your affidavit, of course, is at page 735, which is in volume LL1, B. Yes, B. LL1B. Perhaps you can just keep that open next to you as you give a very, very quick overview, high-level overview, and I'll ask you questions about that, about the meeting.
So what page is that again, sir?
My note says 735. Let me just double check. I think that is indeed correct. It's the second bundle of LL1.
I think there may be confusion with the changes that were made in the numbering and the labeling. Maybe Mr. Mkwena should just check that you have your files are labeled the same way as his in terms of the latest labeling.
It's LLB, the requirement for the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
Okay. LL1B.
Yes, it's LL1B.
Yeah, there is a 1.
Yeah.
I said 1, my mistake.
Okay, and what page did you say?
Page 735.
735. Okay.
That is the red numbers, page numbers.
At the left top.
Okay.
Mr. Zuma, do you have it?
I've got it, sir.
Right, keep that next to you. I don't want you to read it out, but if you can just, for purposes of commencing your re-examination this morning, give a quick overview in a chronological fashion of what happened, please.
Okay, so as I said, there were rumors making the rounds on a certain issue which has been termed as blackmailing between Uncle Fana and Mr. Jonas. These are rumors that were persisting for a few months, and by the time I'd spoken to Uncle Fana, this was at a point where I was like, okay, we need to see what's going on here. Because on the one hand, when I'd spoken to Uncle Fana, he wasn't too sure about the rumors, and he just said, look, let's leave it. I popped it up again, said the same thing, and at the third time of asking, he said, okay, if you are very sure about this and serious about this, you resolve it. So
You resolve it?
Yes. Resolving meaning set up a meeting, get the three of us to sit down, and we'll discuss this matter. Now,
And just for the record, Mr. Mokoena just reminded me, if you say Uncle Fana, you mean
it's Mr.
Mr.
Chongwane.
Chongwane?
Yes, sorry
Yes.
about that. Cool. Yeah, just
Go ahead.
cool. Thank you. So, if I'm not mistaken, that would have been the period leading up to October 23rd meeting. I was given the number, obviously, by Uncle Fana, because I did not have Mr. Jonas's number. As I said, I never met him before. I didn't see anything untoward. It's normal course. If there's any issue, if there's any discussion to be had, you speak to people. And it's either they agree to meet or not. So I got his number, and contact was initiated. Initially, it was via SMS, and then one or two phone calls, but there was a busy period in between. And I think it took quite a few weeks for us to sit around the table. So by the time we decided to meet up, it was on the 23rd. Mr. Jonas was at Nidlak, which is in Rosebank.
23rd of October?
Yes.
Yes?
So this is the day in question. So the Nidlak offices are in Rosebank. I'm not too far from Rosebank. I live in Saxonwold, as is known. And
Saxonwold is a suburb that
yes,
that's
is
next to
Rosebank.
Rosebank.
Yeah, it's adjacent to Rosebank. So I'd received a message from Mr. Jonas saying, look, I'll be leaving out of town later this afternoon, evening. There's an opportunity to meet because Nidlak seems like it's finishing off early today. And that's when he'd sent the times. And if I'm not mistaken, he moved it again a bit earlier. I actually arrived to the meeting slightly late because the time was moved a bit. As I got to the venue, which was the Hyatt Regency in Rosebank.
So just to stop there for a moment, whose idea was it to go to the Hyatt?
That's Mr. Jonas's idea.
Right, and then?
When I got to the Hyatt, he was there already, sitting in the reception area, the lobby, should I say, and greeted him, exchanged very short pleasantries, and obviously we were waiting for Uncle Fana to arrive. And in that interleading period, that's when the phone call came in. And
Which
said,
phone call?
The phone call that was the venue change phone call.
Just explain that in a bit more
Okay,
detail,
so
please.
the phone call came in on my mobile device from Uncle Fana to say, look, I'm not comfortable meeting in a public area. Mr. Jonas also looked uncomfortable, as was I, because it's a hotel lobby. People are sitting around. Everyone's got their own profile or whatever it is. So the phone call came in. They had the discussion between the two of them. And I said, look, whatever you guys decide, we'll go. So the decision for the venue was a very difficult one because we couldn't go to Uncle Fana's house because he stays in another suburb in that area.
In Hyde Park?
Yes. He was on his way to the meeting. He wanted a meeting changed to somewhere more private. And that's where I'd suggested. Down the road, there's a place that I do work from, which happens to be the household. And the reason why I do work from there is because there are also some office facilities. I've been conducting my meetings outside of the office for a very long time, from the Gupta residence, as it's called.
Could I perhaps just interrupt you here? Why not your own home? We heard it was about 600 meters away from the Gupta residence.
I don't conduct meetings from my personal home.
Do you have office facilities at home? Or did you have it that
I've
time?
got an office, but that's purely for my own private matters.
And if you could just expand a bit, on the facilities at the Gupta residence. What were they like? Were there facilities, and why would that be a good place to go?
Yeah, so when I say facilities, it's just obviously printing capacity, staff. In between, I mean, there's what's it, catering sort of.
Catering.
Catering, yeah.
Yes.
Food, water, coffee, whatever it is, snacks. And it just makes it easier as opposed to sitting in a coffee shop. And it's a private area. So that's what I mean by office facilities.
And could I just ask you this? Did any of the, if I say do, I mean back in October 2015, did any of the Gupta brothers work from home? Did they conduct any business from home? From that specific part of what I think has generally been called the compound?
Yes. As I said, the person that I worked very closely with was Mr. Tony Gupta. That's the person that I was in business with, and we conducted.
He's now
Rajesh.
Say that again, please.
Mr. Rajesh Gupta.
Rajesh,
Yeah.
also known as Tony.
Also known as Tony.
Yes.
As I said, we spent a lot of time together. We conducted business on a daily basis, wherever it was. Whether we'd go to the office at times. And as I said yesterday, I limited my movements to the office, and we conducted a lot of our business from the household. As for the other two brothers, they spent a lot of time at the offices. And obviously there's varying offices in Midrand and in Sandton.
All right. So it was a convenient venue to move the discussion to. And if you can go on then, yes. What happened?
So after the phone call, after there was mutual agreement between the three parties, I'm obviously the one that came up with the venue. That's when we decided to make a move.
Did Mr. Jonas know where you were going?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Did you mention the name of the owner of the property, the family?
Yes, I did.
And was he happy with that?
He was, like I said, the whole time from when I'd met him, during the meeting, post the meeting, there was no apprehension from his side, there was no hostility. So the way I took it is he was fine to do so. And
right.
If he wasn't, he would have said so, I'm sure.
And then what happened?
From that point, logistically, he decided to come with me. He said, you have your own vehicle? I said, yes. Jump in with you. I said,
did he ask you about your vehicle?
Yes.
Did he ask you to, in fact, go with you, or did you offer him to come with you?
I'd said, I've got my vehicle, and if we can go, it just made logistics easier. We didn't have to follow each other. And he said, if you do have a vehicle, I will jump in the car with you.
Right, and then?
So he had his security/entourage, which he had to leave behind, obviously.
Did he give them any instructions?
I'm not sure what their discussion was, but they did not come along.
And then what happened?
And obviously, the reason he done that obviously was because we're going somewhere private. Otherwise, he would have followed us with his team. And I appreciated that. So we jumped into my vehicle and we made our way to the residence.
Did you stop anywhere?
We stopped there's an engine garage which is just around the corner from the Hyatt, because I was low on petrol. So that took a bit of time. And from there, we continued to the residence, and that's when we had arrived almost simultaneously with Uncle Fana. Walked into the residence, went to the lounge, we sat in the lounge, and that's when we started the discussions. Obviously, pleasantries were exchanged. These are two gentlemen that have known each other for a very long time, as they've both confirmed. They shared a few war stories from their MK days, and that's when I introduced the meeting and the reason we're there for the meeting.
So your role has been described differently, sometimes as that of a mediator, sometimes as that of a spectator, sometimes as merely somebody who got people together. Sure. And the question was asked, and I think legitimately so, why need you? Why were you there at all?
Why? Before he answers, I must just say that he described his role in that meeting as almost a spectator or mediator.
Yes, no, certainly.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, I have no quarrel with that, but
Yes.
the qualitative question that followed on that was, well, why were you needed at all? Why
No,
not
no,
leave it just to the two of them to sort it out over the phone or by some other meeting?
Yes.
It's for
No, I
him
don't
to
have a
deal with
problem with that. It's just that I gained the impression that it was as if it's other people who described his
No,
role.
no,
as,
I
so
thought
just-
I made the statement wide enough. In
Yes.
fact, if one reads his own statement,
Yes.
he uses the term mediator there.
Yes,
So I'm asking now the witness really just
No,
to,
that's fine,
to
yeah.
clarify your function in that meeting, please.
Yes, so my function in the meeting was, besides pulling the two parties together, because that's what resolving issues is about. Get the people around the table, that was my one function. And the second one, as per agreement, that meeting could never have happened between the two of them without the person that had introduced this issue of the background, rumors, and that sort of thing. So if you're raising that, you need to be part of that meeting. You need to own that rumor-mongering idea, and you need to present it yourself. Because when I'm asked, and I'm alone in that meeting, it's a very difficult thing to do. Because Uncle Fano would be asked, hey, but who's saying this? He might mention my name, he might not mention my name. So the idea was that I be in the meeting, I own the issue of the meeting, and I present it. And that's exactly what happened.
So you had an active role insofar as that's concerned. If I correctly understand, Mr. Zuma, tell me if I miscategorize what your function was. You were actually there to explain the fact of the rumor, not the truth of it, of course, but
Yes.
the fact of the rumors of blackmail. You were there to present evidence, so to speak, of
Yeah,
the fact that there are rumors like that. Otherwise, there would simply be a denial.
Correct. I was, if I may say, I was acting as a witness as well in that meeting, because, I was going to be tested as well, and which I was, to say, okay, you raising this, where did you hear it, why did you hear it, who was saying it, whatever the questions would have been at that time. And why are you pulling us together? Why didn't you just raise it with Uncle Fana, he raised it with me? All those questions would have obviously been canvassed in that meeting, and they were. And I said, look, I'm over here. I cannot just say something. I've had the discussion with Uncle Fana. I cannot not own this issue, and that's exactly why I was there, to say I'm presenting it to you. And I was at the risk of a denial, and that's exactly what happened.
So he denied,
Yeah,
Mr.
of course he
Jonas
did.
denied.
Yes, he did.
He denied the fact of blackmail, but not the fact of the rumor,
He denied
that
the fact of blackmail, yes.
but not the fact that there was a rumor.
Yes, no. I'm not sure if he was aware of it or not. I don't know, but this is what I'd heard.
All right, and then what happened?
So yeah, the meeting continued. It took the shape it did.
How long was the meeting?
Say approximately 40, 45 minutes. I mean, I'll need to
Yeah,
to
it's
check
an
the timing.
approximate,
Yeah, but let's call it.
gives an idea.
Yeah, let's
Yes.
call it 45 minutes.
And then how did it end?
It ended in a stalemate, obviously. There was this allegation that was put to him that he denied. There was a back and forth between the two of them that ended up the way it did. But by the time the meeting was done, it was agreed that, look, this matter, we'll pick up on it on another occasion, because there was obviously time constraints from Mr. Jonas. He was traveling to wherever he was traveling. Then at that point, I'd walked Mr. Jonas out to the arrival area, the parking lot, and I'd asked him where he was going to. And he said, look, he's not sure. It's either going to go to the Gautrain in Rosebank or to the airport. And I said, look, here's a driver. He'll take you wherever you need to go. And that was the end of that eventful day.
All right, so he then left. Now, during the course of the meeting, your statement says, affidavit says, that Mr. Rajesh Gupta made an appearance and there was an interaction with him. What happened?
So it was an interruption to the meeting, which was purely to get my attention for confirmation for a meeting, which was going to be over the next day or a few days. So he peered into the room, got my attention, and I'd walked out of the room whilst the conversation continued, and then I popped back in, and that was for a short period. It wasn't a long period.
You explained your relationship with Mr. Tony Gupta Rajesh yesterday. Could I ask you at this point to give a quick overview of the three brothers whose names have been mentioned, AJ, Atul, and Rajesh, just age-wise, and where were the other two brothers that day? Were they at home or were they elsewhere? What's your recollection?
Okay, Mr. AJ obviously will be the eldest brother. Mr. Atul's the middle brother. Age-wise, not too sure. Let me approximate it as well. Let's put Mr. AJ at late 50s, and Mr. Atul in his mid-50s.
Please raise your voice, Mr. Zuma.
Sorry, Mr. AJ in his late 50s, Mr. Atul in his mid-50s, and Mr. Tony in his late 40s.
Is it possible to say who the not, I don't think one should call it a patriarch, but who's the main outside face of the family at that time?
By outside face, may you...
Yes, the person who makes representations and decisions and
No,
so forth.
that in my view would be Mr. Atul, which is a middle brother, because he was a chairman of the group. And then on that day, because when we have meetings at the house, is generally nobody else. Nobody else meaning the brothers would always go, the other brothers, the two brothers would be either traveling or at the office, because they were quite strictly office bound. So for them not to be there is not an anomaly.
Now, Mr. AJ Gupta, do you have any idea where he was that day? Was he around or not?
I'm not sure where he would have been that day. I've read his testimony, but from my recollection, at that time, I did not see him in the household at any point.
He states on oath that he was at the office.
Then that's probably where he was.
And Mr. Atul Gupta?
Once again, he wasn't at the house at that particular point in time, and I've read the documents in front of me, and as the documents state, he wasn't in the country at that time, so he was traveling.
Right. Now, Mr. Jonas had now left after the meeting with a vehicle that you organized, one of the Gupta vehicles that you organized a driver for him to take him either to the airport or the Gautrain, whatever the case might be. Did you have anything further to do with him? Did you meet him again, see him again?
Yeah, so before he left the household after the meeting, we'd agreed that we'd have a follow-up in the following week, the Monday or Tuesday or so. And that never happened. There was one or two SMS exchanges, and then it just quietened down. And that's the last bit of communication that we'd had post the meeting.
Did you see him again?
Yes, I did see him again. Like I said, I think twice. Once was at the same Hyatt hotel. He was standing outside waiting for whoever or whatever on his phone. And I'd seen him, I'm like, hey, Mr. Jonas, how are you, sir? And this was post, obviously now, the news stories that broke. He'd put out a statement. He'd made these allegations, and I went to greet him to check how he was doing. He looked okay, gave him a big handshake and a hug, and kept it moving. And then the next time I'd seen him after that was, I may be mistaken, was either State of the Nation address or opening of Parliament, one of the two, I don't know.
But you saw him in Cape Town?
Yes, in Cape Town. It was after the event when everyone was walking out of the venue, and we actually ended up bumping into each other. We were walking down the stairs together, and that's when I'd greeted him, and he greeted back, and we continued on our path.
All right. Now, against that background, I'm going to ask you some pointed questions about issues that came up during our learned colleague's examination of you yesterday. In the first place, There are 3 points, I think, that have to do with the media. And
Sorry,
the first-
with the?
With the media.
Okay.
The first, can I ask you now to go to the first file of these two, I think it's file A, just call it file A, LL1A, at page 23. You asked a number of questions about this. You will recall that this is a statement that came by Oak Bay, and it's dated the 13th of March 2016. It looks like a media statement.
Okay, well, is that the one about which we had
LL1
problems yesterday?
LL1A,
A.
Okay, cool.
page
Thanks, Chief.
23.
Isn't that the page that didn't have the statement from my side?
That's the one, Chief.
Oh, yes, I do recall.
Yeah, but
I do recall.
it's fine. You can
Mr.
continue.
Chair, have you seen the statement?
No, I have seen it, yes.
Good.
Yeah, I have
I
seen
think
it.
the witness,
Has
we
got
gave
it,
him
yeah.
one yesterday.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Excellent. So now everybody has one.
Yes.
Just to get the record straight again, on the 13th of March 2016, Oak Bay, it would appear, it's Oak Bay Investments, if you look at the foot of the page, statement issued by Oak Bay Investments on 13 March 2016. You were asked whether at that time you were a director of Oak Bay. Can you recall?
I'll have to check. I cannot recall. But
Were
chances are I was.
Were you asked about this statement?
Asked by who, sir?
Anybody in the Gupta family?
No, no,
The person who made the statement?
No, I was not asked.
Now, it would appear that this statement was in response to an article on the same day that was published in the Sunday Times. Just to perhaps give you a broad overview and ask you whether you have any knowledge of these dates. These dates come from the statement of Mr. Jonas, and they would seem to be quite correct, namely that there was a Financial Times London report on the 8th of March 2016. Did you see that report? Do you know anything about it?
I know about it. I didn't follow up on it at that time, though.
And then there was a News 24 report on the 10th of March 2016. Did you see that? Can you recall
I
it?
think I did see that one.
We're going to go to that in a moment. And then there was the Sunday Times report of the 13th of March 2016, and then came the Oak Bay statement.
Yes, I did see that one.
Now, we've been able to find the statement that was published, not statement, apologize, the report that was made in the Sunday Times, the article that was written about this on the 13th of March 2016. Mr. Chairman, I wonder, could I perhaps ask to hand this to you? It provides a lot of context.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Let's see, probably it shouldn't be a problem.
And there's one for the witness as well.
We'll have to.
I thought
Have to put it in as.
I put at the right top in pencil LL123 capital A because it sits snugly behind the
Well,
Oak Bay report.
maybe let's just make it a separate exhibit on its own, as his exhibit.
Fine.
Yeah. So this was LL. Mr. Mkwena will be hearing me. He might be able to suggest it should be LL2.
No, but we've got an LL2,
Oh, we've
if
got
I'm not
LL2.
mistaken. We've got LL1, which consists of two
Yeah,
bundles, A and B,
yes.
and then LL2,
Yeah.
which is the small bundle, the C bundle.
Yeah.
So
Should it be
this could be
LL3?
LL3. 8. Oh, I see. So the numbers have gone on. So it must be LL8. LL8.
LL8. This is one article.
It's one article.
It's one article. Okay, and it's the article from the Sunday Times. Where is it from?
You can see at the foot on the first page, Times Live Sunday Times. The date's given 13 March 2016, and the article is headed, How Gupta's Shopped for New Minister.
Okay, so this will be this article, Sunday Times article of 13 March 2016, will be marked Exhibit LL8.
Chair, with your leave, not 18 March, but 13 March.
Or is it 13 March?
1-3.
Oh, no, I thought I said 13. But
I thought I had 18. I
13,
apologize.
yeah. No, I think I said 13, yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Mr. Zuma, do you see that? I just want to take you to a few points in this document. Now, before I do so, could I just remind you questions that were put to you yesterday about the Oak Bay statement of the 13th of March, and the main issue was, in the middle of the page, it was pointed out to you that there was a statement to the following, in the following words, to be clear, with a colon, there was no meeting at all. You see that?
Yes, I see that.
You recall that?
I recall that, sir.
And the question, quite fairly, was put to you, well, what about your meeting? There was a meeting, wasn't there?
Yes.
Now, the question, of course, is one of context. The meeting that was dealt with in this statement that was issued by Oak Bay obviously dealt with the meeting that was reported about in the Sunday Times article that I'm going to take you to now in a moment, which on your version is a fiction. It never happened.
With the inclusion of the brothers.
Yes.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
All right, so if I can quickly take you to the report or article that was published in the Sunday Times. It starts off with the news that President Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane, was present when members of the Gupta family offered Deputy Minister Mr. Jonas, then Finance Minister Ntene's job. The Sunday Times can. There have been an extraordinary number of allegations around the Gupta family in recent weeks, several of which have involved the finance ministry. As we have said countless times, our primary focus is on business, not by a fixer, described as a controversial business person and political figure in Gauteng. This was 2 weeks before Zuma axed Nene. Jonas turned the Guptas down. Right? It goes on, and it says, numerous attempts to get comment from Jonas were unsuccessful yesterday. Then it deals with what a presidency spokesperson, Bongani Mayola, said. It's reported that he said, only the president had the authority to appoint ministers and deputy ministers, and then there's a quotation, it is therefore totally unacceptable that anyone would seek to abrogate that responsibility to themselves. Such alleged actions have neither the knowledge, sanction, nor support of the president. It goes on, Treasury spokeswoman Phumza Makanda declined to comment. It goes on then further, and this is where it becomes important. Several highly placed sources in the Treasury and the ANC alliance confirmed to the Sunday Times that Jonas met with AJ and Atul Gupta, and the president's son, Duduzane, is a business, there's a verb missing, I think, is a business partner of the Gupta brothers in a number of registered companies. This he must be a reference to you. He responded to a written question, he responded to written questions in an email. There was no such meeting at all. As such, your questions are irrelevant. Now, assuming for the moment that reference of he is to you, do you have any recollection of having sent an email at that point or not?
Well, most definitely not.
So that he cannot be a reference to you. It must be somebody else.
That's somebody else, yes.
And then it goes on, of course they do this to prove those things, those they call that, quotes, whether you like it or not, we are in charge. And there's, it seems to me, something missing in the text, but it goes on. In the meeting, Jonas was told that the job was his if he wanted it, but would come with conditions. He would have to push for the approval of the nuclear procurement program and clear certain men from the top echelons of the Treasury. And it goes on, he was given a list of people to get rid of, including Director Generals, General Lungisa, Ishmael Momaniat, Andrew Donaldson, and Kenneth Brown. The four who have been with the Treasury for more than 22 years are among the fiercest critics of the nuclear procurement program, which they believe would bankrupt South Africa. And then it goes on in a similar vein across the page. It can't be that we have a state that is run by a family or a grouping of people apart from its elected representatives, block quotes. I think that's actually a quotation mark that's written out. And then firing them, sources said, would have allowed the family to capture the Treasury, as 4 vacancies would have been filled by bureaucrats approved by the Guptas. Then it goes on about the nuclear program, Shiva uranium, and so forth. And at the foot of that, Jonas is believed to have called ANC General Gwedi Mantashe and Nene to report the Gupta meeting. After the meeting, Jonas, according to the source, also called Duduzane to tell him to stop what he is doing. Was there ever such a phone call?
No, there was not.
Or any other communication of any sort?
Nope, there was not.
It goes across the page. It's quite clear that the Gupta's influence cannot be understated. That's what we need to stop. Mantashe denied receiving a call from Jonas and referred the Sunday Times to the Deputy Minister, and then in an enigmatic way said, phone Sibesi and ask him, because he's alive, he's not an ancestor, he's capable of speaking for himself. And then, importantly, the next paragraph reads as follows. Please listen carefully. Nene told...
I'm sorry. What would have come across as Msebenzi was Mcebisi.
I apologize, Chair.
Mcebisi is Mr. Jonas's name.
No, certainly, yes.
Msebenzi might be somebody else.
I'm going to receive lessons afterwards about clicks. Then the next paragraph is of importance. Mr. Zuma, Nene told the Sunday Times that he knew nothing about the meeting and did not recall any conversation with Jonas about the meeting with the Gupta family. See that?
Yes, I see that.
That, of course, from other sources appears to be contradicted at this point.
Yes, sir.
It then goes on, after Jonas turned down the office to replace Nene, David van Rooyen was appointed finance minister. The markets reacted with shock, and it then goes into the whole Nenegate thing and the replacement with Mr. Gordon. And it really then goes on about other political fallout issues from this report. Now, was this, I take it this was the report to which the Oak Bay statement responded?
I'm not sure, but it seems like that's...
The times,
yes,
the
yes,
dates
the day
work,
after,
out,
yes,
work out in that sequence.
Yes, sir.
All right, then, importantly, still on this topic of statements and so forth, if I could ask you just about something that you testified about the public protector yesterday, and you expressed some concern with the way that the public protector dealt with the investigation and your role and function in that whole investigation. Perhaps you can just explain to the chair what had happened and what was it that made you raised your concerns concerning the public protector's investigation.
Okay. No, I think the reason we're all sitting here today at the State Capture Commission is based on the findings of the public protector report. The various role players that have had to come and testify, I mean, that's not what I'm getting into, but some of us have been integral to those investigations. We've sit here alleged of all sorts of wrongdoing, corruption, bribery. You know, it's been going on almost on a daily basis from about 3 years ago. So what I would have expected was a fair opportunity to represent or reflect on my side of the story, like I'm doing here yesterday and today. I didn't get that opportunity. Was communication sent to me? Yes, it was.
Sorry, can I just ask you, perhaps just pointed questions. Were you invited to the public protector?
This was towards the tail end, from a time frame perspective towards the tail end. Time-wise, but before the tail end, meaning before the report was finalized. I was traveling at the time. I'd received a phone call. I forget the lady's name that called. And she'd said she's from the public protector's office, and she was checking if I had communication. And I said, I'll check my emails. And she telephonically said, no, check it. We are inviting you just to come and sit and have a discussion, an interview, and just to get to your side of the story and the version of events. And I said, cool, I'll check that. Checked the email, and indeed there was an email. Following up, and this was a very short period after the phone call and the email, I received a summons or a subpoena of some sort to appear urgently. And the discussion that I'd had with the representative from the Public Protector's Office is, I'm not in the country currently, I'm conducting business. I'm not living in South Africa any longer at that time. So I'll need time, and when I get back, I will look you up and I'll come in and present myself. So that was the sequence of events. And before I could even make those decisions, there was a finalized report that had come out. Now, the reason I'd raised it yesterday is, obviously, I'm sitting here today. I've been mentioned in all sorts of lights. I didn't have an opportunity to give my version of events, and the basis of that report is what this whole State Capture Commission is about. I'm sitting here having to answer all sorts of allegations that could have been answered at that point.
Did the Public Protector make available to you the versions of other persons, such as Mr. Jonas, perhaps?
No.
For you to respond to it?
I did not receive any notices. I didn't receive any transcripts. That was, everything I've seen has been post the finalizing of a report.
Good. Now, if I could perhaps then ask you one or two rather small questions about questions that were put to you yesterday to conclude. The first one concerns an invitation by the chair to you to speculate about what the reasons would have been why Mr. Jonas raised the hue and cry after the meeting with Messrs. Nene and Gordon. I'm not going to ask you about the contents of those discussions. That's before the Commission, and we'll deal with that in due course. But what I'm going to ask you is this, not to speculate. What actually happened to you as a consequence of Mr. Jonas's statements, taking into account the fact that he did not lay a charge against you for reasons that he gave to the Commission earlier? What happened to you? What were the consequences of his statements?
There've been quite a few consequences, so I'll get into them. But I think before I get to that and answer your question, I'd just like to make a point, if I may.
Of course.
I mean, I'm not sure if I'll have an opportunity to speak ever again, so once I leave this chair, I just want to satisfy that.
Yes, you can make your point.
Thank you. I think there are three levels to this whole scenario that need to be satisfied. The first one being, the three of them being political, legal, and perception. Now, on the perception front, that is purely on the court of public opinion, which is driven by a narrative that stems from media reports and allegations from wherever they come from. Now, I'm looked at as a criminal. I'm looked at as this face of corruption, this guy that's plundered trillions out of this country, which is not the case, by the way. So I'd just like to say to the public out there, I'm not corrupt. I'm not taking any money from anybody. I never have, and I never will. How they take it, that's not for me to decide. But I just want to make that clear. So when you see me walking around, you know, just know that it's not me. Secondly, there's the legal perspective, which is obviously one of the reasons I'm sitting here today. There have been a lot of legal repercussions stemming out of all sorts of investigations or lack of investigations. I've had to walk in and out of courtrooms. I've had to face charges that I shouldn't be
Can
facing.
I just ask you there, just be a bit more specific? You were arrested, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what were you arrested for?
This was at the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court, and that was a charge of corruption.
And what did that stem from? What was the complaint?
No, the complaint is the specific matter we're dealing with right now.
The
which
Jonas
is
matter.
The Jonas, yes.
The
that's
Jonas
correct.
meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think, if I may just perhaps assist you, the charges would have been framed under the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act 12 of 2004,
Yes, that's correct.
also known as PRECA,
Yes, sir.
as well as perhaps POCA,
Yes, Poco as
the
well.
Prevention of Organized Crime Act of 1998. Now, how did the arrest take place? Where were you arrested, and what happened?
Obviously, there was a lot of speculation in the media. And by the time I was labeled a fugitive, so I was living out of the country. I was in so-called self-imposed exile, which I was not. There's reasons why I wasn't living here, which I'll get into. When I landed at OR Tambo, I was escorted to...
So you were just coming back to South Africa for some other purpose?
Yeah, I was coming for my little brother's funeral last year. That's the reason I was coming back. So on my arrival, there's obviously some sort of notice that I had to face the consequences of my actions, and that when I asked the gentleman at the immigration, he told me it was a notice that was originating from the Rosebank police station. So a complaint that was put forward by the Democratic Alliance. I said, okay, cool. That was at the airport. Fortunately, my legal team managed to arrive on time and resolve that issue. And we dealt with the matter on the Monday, because I arrived, I think, on a Thursday evening.
Was there any press present when you were arrested?
No, not at the airport, no. On the Monday, that's when we went through the whole rigmarole of going to the police station and then the courtroom, and you know, that's public knowledge. So that is the way that the arrest happened. And at all material times, I had my legal representative with me, and we just wanted to see the documentation, which was not forthcoming by the law enforcement officers. You know, we wanted to see the charge sheets, we wanted to see the warrants if there were any, and we were not furnished with those. So it was a very peculiar situation, but you know, it turned out the way it turned out.
But it was based on Mr. Jonas's reports about what happened
Yes,
at the meeting.
That's eventually what.
Only on that.
That's what we found out.
And Mr. Jonas refused to make a statement.
Yes, that's also what we found out via his testimony here.
And then what happened with these charges?
They persisted for. When we appeared at the.
So I think you were arrested in July last year.
Yes, it was around that time. So after we appeared at the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court, they postponed it for, I think it was a period of six months or so, for further investigations. And by the time we'd gone back to appear, that's when the charges were provisionally withdrawn. And that was on the basis that they are waiting for the outcome of the commission.
Do you feel aggrieved by the arrest?
Yeah, of course I do.
Are you going to take any legal steps about it?
Most definitely, yeah.
Do you know, I suppose you do know, that your lawyers have addressed a letter of demand to the police?
Yes, that's exactly
for
what's
wrongful arrest?
Correct, sir.
All right.
I'll just say, if I may make a point, the reason for that is, as we'd found out, on the charge sheet there has not been a complainant. So, my limited knowledge of how things work is if there's no complainant, there's no charge. So, someone has to explain exactly what's going on.
Look, I think there were complainants, but they were not Mr. Jonas.
No, not.
And Mr. Jonas would not provide a statement.
That's a point I'm trying to make. Yeah.
All right. Then,
Sorry, if I may continue, I wasn't done.
yeah,
with
you were
my-
still at the third point, or
Yes,
second point. You're
yes.
going to the third point.
Yes, so the second point was illegal, which we've covered a bit of, and I'll leave that so I don't belabor that point. And then the first is obviously the political, and I think we'd all be fooling ourselves to think that there hasn't been a political play in the background.
Right.
Speculation is one thing, but I think if we look back in hindsight, the history speaks for itself. If you look at how a lot of the issues have come to the fore, the people that have brought the issues to the fore, what has happened to people on either side of the political wranglings, I think that is an obvious case. And I've said it before, and I'm saying it again. I believe I'm unfortunately caught in a political storm.
Right. The second last point I wish to deal with is a point that our learned colleague made yesterday over and over and over again, which was that that there is a discrepancy between the version that you told the chair about the meeting, namely that Mr. Rajesh Gupta came in, and what Mr. Shlongwane said in his interview with the public protector, saying that it was not one of the three Gupta brothers, might have been another one. He doesn't know, but it was perhaps not Mr. Rajesh. Do you recall that?
Yes, I recall that.
And it was put to you on the basis, I would think, that this discrepancy is destructive of your version.
Yes.
And the truth of your version. Now, could I ask you not to speculate about what Mr. Shlongwane might have thought on this point, but perhaps just to turn to page in the second bundle of LL1A. Sorry, this is now at B, LL1B, page 742.
Please just repeat the page number.
742.
742.
That would be Mr. Rajesh's statement.
Yes, you perhaps have seen this before, but he makes the point that he was there at the property, and that indeed he did peek into the meeting, take you out and had a quick discussion with you about administrative things, and then left.
Yes. So,
And this is on oath. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Good. Mr. Zuma, I think in conclusion, may I ask you whether there's anything that you would want to add to your evidence? You have refreshed your memory about the statement that you made to the chair. You made the point yesterday that your statement is perhaps not as comprehensive as otherwise it could have been. It didn't deal with all of the phone calls and SMSs and WhatsApps, perhaps, leading up to the meeting with Mr. Jonas and perhaps afterwards. You've seen what Mr. Jonas said about that. You agree that there were communications between you. Is there anything else, perhaps a detail that you would want to focus on in conclusion? You will not have the chance again.
I think a lot of the points we've covered, and as Mr. Mokoena said, there's a lot of common cause issues that are a non-starter because we agree on the versions. At this point, I think I've said what I can say. My statement obviously is not as comprehensive as it should be, but I think that's the points that I wanted to cover. A lot of what has been said, I don't know the detail of. I have not checked people's cell phone records, SMSs, phone calls, and whatever else may have been left out of my affidavit.
Mr. Zuma, if there are any further queries by the Commission, would you assist?
I'm here to comply. I've complied the whole way through, even though it's been made to look like I've been evasive and running away. I've been here 3 times before. This is my 4th time. So I have no issues with complying with the Commission. I hope I don't have to see Mrs. Zondo ever again, but if I have to, I've complied and I will comply.
Chair, those are the questions. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I suspect that Mr. Mkwena wishes to say something, but I think we must take the tea adjournment now. I will also have maybe a few questions to put to you, Mr. Zuma. I can mention that I did share with your counsel, the legal team, that there are other statements in which you have been mentioned in regard to meetings other than the ones that you have been asked about. And but the arrangement is that my impression or my understanding is that those would have been sent to you before, but your legal team was not sure whether they were sent or whether they received them. So the arrangement is that the Commission's legal team will look at whether they were sent and be in touch with your legal team. And if there is a need for you to deal with them in one way or another, there will be discussions around that. That may or may not entail a request that you come back, but both legal teams will look at all issues, and you will hear from your legal team about those. So I thought I would just mention that for now.
Sound.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
But I realize that you don't want to see me again. We are going to take the tea adjournment. It's 26 minutes past 11. We'll resume at 22:12. We adjourn. Yes, Mr. Mkwena.
Mr. Chair, you would recall that yesterday I stayed away from posing any questions relating to the public protector because I thought that that proceedings had their own life elsewhere and they were dealt with decisively. But I see that they also emerged in re-examination. And I thought that maybe there must be 2 or 3 clarity questions from our side to Mr. Zuma, simply, to place the matter in its proper context. And if I'm permitted, I'll limit myself to only those 3 or 4 questions of the PP, because I think it's quite important.
Okay, no, that's all right. And I think you must maybe use this opportunity to tell me what happened to the discussions that you were supposed to have with Mr. Zuma's legal team about the issue that he raised yesterday. I think he was saying there was some omission.
Yes.
And I said the legal teams will talk, and then I would be updated. I would get a report back this morning about whether it's something that I need to know or what the position is.
It would appear that it was never persisted with because Mr. Lowe did not persist with it today, Chair, and I take it that it was since resolved either between Mr. Zuma and his legal team because no one have raised it for today. So it might be that it's no longer an issue that ought, to receive your attention.
Okay,
Yes.
well, if there is no issue and whatever he might have had in mind is sorted, that would be fine. But I think Mr. Lowe will or wishes to say something. Maybe let's clear that and before you continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are 2 points that our learned colleague made. He wants to ask a few questions about the public protector. We have no quarrel with that, of course. The reason why we dealt with the public protector is because of reports that have apparently been published overnight in some of the press about what Mr. Zuma said yesterday in these proceedings. So it was really to give him an opportunity to deal with that and just to perhaps clarify issues from his perspective.
Yes, yes.
It was not to deal with a new front and opening a new front. The second point is the issue of it was termed, I think, yesterday an omission or an oversight or a gap or something like that.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, with respect, after some reflection, we decided not to ask questions about it. It really concerns Ms. Mentour and what she testified about and what had happened. But we can deal with all of those aspects at the end of the day, should you invite us to present argument, which we take it that you will. Taking into account, Mr. Chair, that insofar as this part of item 1.1 of the schedule to the proclamation is concerned, you have to make a factual finding. And we would like, of course, in due course, to present argument to you on that factual finding, submissions, So we have no quarrel with questions about the public protector. I told you why we went there this morning. And then insofar as the other aspect is concerned, once again, it is not really a matter for Mr. Zuma to deal with. It's more a matter of argument.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Zuma, I'm sure that the public protector's, reports, which are not here, will speak for themselves. We did not bring them along, and I'm simply asking these questions in order to clarify certain aspects, arising from your re-examination. Do I understand you correctly that you did, as a matter of fact, receive an invitation from the public protector to participate in the proceedings?
At some point, yes, I did.
Yes. And you then went overseas, am I correct?
Yes, I was out of the country.
Yes. You received then a subpoena.
After
After
a phone call, yes, I received this subpoena.
And you are not able to honor the subpoena because you're overseas.
Yes, and I communicated it quite clearly that I'm traveling. When I get back, I'll come and present myself.
So you were not ignored. At least there was the invitation and there was a subpoena.
That's correct, sir.
Yes. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, no, thank you. Mr. Zuma, I have just a few questions to clarify certain things.
Before you ask, Chair, can I just clarify one thing just from the
Yes.
line of question about? And
Yes.
I just want to make it clear. The procedural part of how the public protector dealt with it, it's up for debate. All I'm saying is my version is not on the final report. And I take your point, look for another avenue. You said that I should have maybe taken an approach like Mr. AJ Gupta did to force himself to go and present himself. Once again, I humbly disagree with that, because if people are looking for versions, a version of events, that's something that we need to present. They need to give us that opportunity. We can't be fighting for that opportunity, especially when it's something that affects us via allegations. So I'm just merely putting across that I'm sitting here today, and that's what I said yesterday. Why is my version not on of events, not on the public protector's report? That's all I was saying.
No, that's fine.
Thank
But
you.
also I must just say, when I referred to what Mr. Ajay Gupta did, I wasn't necessarily saying that's what you were obliged to do or necessarily should have done. I was simply saying, here is another way in which somebody else who wanted to put his side of the story that he did maybe, and I think I put it that maybe that's what you should have considered as well. So I put it no higher than that.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right. You referred to drinks or drinking facilities when your counsel asked you, I think, about the choice to go to the Gupta residence for this meeting among the three of you, that is yourself, Mr. Tlongwane, and Mr. Jonas. But I didn't hear the exact full story of what you say about drinks. Were you saying that, sorry, yes.
In facilities. It wasn't a shebeen. It was catering facilities.
Or catering facilities. Well, I did say I didn't hear the full story, and maybe that's why it's important to clarify. Just repeat exactly what you were saying about whether it's catering or drinks or whatever.
I'll do so, Chair. Thank you. What I was referring to was immediate facilities for any catering requirements for guests or people that we're meeting with. That would be tea, coffee, snacks, biscuits, nuts, whatever people have. So that's what I was referring to. Hot drinks, as in temperature, not alcohol. Yeah.
Now, my difficulty with that is that I would think that in your own house at Saxon World, you would receive friends. And if you would receive friends, you would offer them drinks. So why would the fact that there are certain catering facilities at the Gupta residence really be an important factor in the choice of the venue when we are talking about the fact that one of these people is your friend, Mr. Tlongwane was your friend, and the other person was your friend's friend. So one would think that it's normal to have friends. It's not a large group. It's just two people, then yourself is three people. And I would have thought that if you have two or three friends in your own home, you can make sure you can afford them drinks and like that. So, or is the position that you didn't entertain friends in your home. Make me understand.
Yes, I'll do so.
Yes.
Chair, when I said the catering parts of the drinks and that sort of thing, I think I didn't say it in isolation. I mentioned office facilities as well and staff. So it's a whole.
At the Gupta residence.
Yes, which
yeah.
is yes, which is something that I may or may not have at my place, which might inform my decision not to have meetings there. I was asked if I have an office there. Yes, I have my own personal office.
Yes.
But do I have facilities that would be office type, printers, staff, runners, whatever it is? No, I don't. So to answer your question, of course, I've entertained very few friends, not many. I do not have a huge staff complement. I do not have typical office type equipment in my home, and that's what would have made me not have any meetings of that sort. Now, to answer your question on Uncle Fana being a friend and Mr. Jonas being a friend's friend, I think I've stated quite clearly that I do not conduct business meetings or meetings of that nature from my residence.
Well, this wasn't, as I understand it, and you must tell me if my understanding of your evidence is not correct. My understanding of your evidence suggests that this was not a business meeting. This was a meeting where you sought to afford two friends to themselves, not both to you, two friends who had an issue to discuss, a private issue,
Yes.
Private issue to discuss, an opportunity to discuss. And it just seems to me that there should be no reason why you can't have two friends in your home who want to discuss a private matter.
Yes, the two friends, they were friendly to each other. I only had one friend, so the other technically is not, and was not my friend.
Yes,
so
but
he remains a, let's call it a stranger, well, especially at that point.
Yes.
So from a welcoming perspective, from having someone in my home that I don't know, something that I don't generally do, and I didn't do on that day.
Yeah, well, I would have thought that at least for purposes of that kind of meeting, your friend's friend would be welcome to your home for purposes of this discussion, which you had taken trouble to say, I want to help them resolve this.
Yes.
You understand where
I understand
I'm coming
that.
from?
I understand where you're coming from.
Yes, yes. And you must tell me, was there a need for any office facilities for this meeting?
No, I mentioned the office was...
Just because you were asked?
No, because that's what my daily business,
Yes.
my daily movements were like. So
Yes.
the point I was trying to make with the office facilities, because I was asked
Yes.
a direct question, why did I not go to my office to have the meeting?
Yes. Oh, okay.
What put me at a residence at that point? And I mentioned
Yeah.
those facilities, so to highlight why I could have meetings of that nature, work-related,
Yes.
in that space.
Yes, no, that's fine. I wanted to also mention, because you asked yesterday about the commission, whether it was investigating or had investigated certain allegations against you. One, the commission investigates allegations that fall within the terms of reference of the commission. But, there will be all kinds of allegations, even in a statement of one witness. And some will be important for purposes of the commission. Some might not really be so important for purposes of the commission, but might be important to the persons affected. So the commission might not investigate everything that's in somebody's statement, but seek to really investigate those that appear to be material for its own purposes. So it does that. But I want to take this opportunity to mention to you, for what it's worth, that Mr. Ajay Gupta and Mr. Atul Gupta, as you know, are not participating in any way in these proceedings. But in regard to Mr. Jonas' evidence, Mr. Ajay Gupta and Mr. Rajesh Gupta, I can't remember about Mr. Atul Gupta, they filed affidavits in their application for leave to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. And in those affidavits, they said what they said. And in regard to Mr. Ajay Gupta, he said on that day he was in his Sentin offices. He was not at the Gupta residence. Months back, and he said in his affidavit, he mentioned the name of a certain lady. And he said that lady who works for his company would corroborate his alibi. And he said, and other employees, but he gave the name of a particular lady. Many months back, I said the investigators must approach that lady and try and get her a statement from her, and so that if necessary she could come and give evidence to say what she may know about where Mr. Ajay Gupta was on the day. Recently, I was told that there were difficulties in getting hold of that lady. So the Commission is interested, even if the Guptas may not be participating, if they have placed information before the Commission that may be helpful for the Commission to get to the bottom of what happened. The Commission will investigate that. I can say that in due course, irrespective of whether that lady is found or not, in due course, probably there will be one or two witnesses who will come to the Commission and talk about Mr. Ajay's alibi, as well as Mr. Ajay Gupta's alibi and Mr. Atul Gupta's position as well, because my understanding is that it was said that he was out of the country at the time, that is Mr. Atul Gupta. I've given instructions that the investigators must check that. And if the information that comes out shows that he was out of the country, that will be put out here in the public. If Mr. Ajay Gupta, the investigation shows that Mr. Ajay Gupta was not at the residence at the relevant time, that also will be put up here publicly. So I just want you to know that we even with them not participating, if they've put information before the Commission that might be important for us to establish who was where, when what was happening, we'll look into that, and the public will know. So, but as I say, there may be some allegations that a particular person who is affected might think is important to follow up, but the Commission might think for its purposes it shouldn't spend more resources on that. But any affected person should feel free to approach the Commission and say, there is this allegation that was made about me. I would like it to be looked into. Then the Commission might be able to say, look, we don't think we want to spend more resources on this, but if you have anything that you want, that you are able to find, bring it. You know? So I mentioned that just so that, one, you know, but also I just want the public to know that we are looking at everything. We are looking at everything. We don't have a version that we want to be proved. We just want the truth, and wherever we might get the evidence.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Okay, the last question that I wanted to ask relates to the rumor that gave rise to the meeting. Is the position that you also didn't know any facts in relation to this rumor. All you knew is there was a rumor.
That's the position, Chair.
That's the position. And once, so in other words, there wasn't much information that you were going to be able to give to the two men at the meeting other than this is what is being said in terms of the rumor, but I have no further information.
That's correct, Chair.
Is that correct? And once Mr. Jonas denied having blackmailed Mr. Hlongwane, was that basically the end of that discussion? Because nobody had further information.
There was no further information, but it was still interrogated.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes. And on your understanding, did Mr. Hlongwane believe that Mr. Jonas was responsible for this rumor, or had done what the rumors suggested he had done, or was his position that he didn't know but wanted to find out?
At that point, from what I'd known, he didn't know, and he wanted to find out.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And did he accept Mr. Jonas' denial as you understood the position at the meeting, or did he? not
Like I
accept
said,
it?
then the meeting ended off after the denial. It took its turn,
Yes.
and by the time the meeting was done, the one
Tuning the Kunara Remillings as well.
to my counsel pointed out it had to do with the poker and the paka issues. So around the so-called bribe.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Did the police ever ask you whether you knew in advance about any offer that somebody from the Gupta family may have made, or was the position that they asked you about it and you said there was no such offer at that meeting and that was the end?
At what point would have that been?
Either at the time of arrest or subsequently before the charges were withdrawn. In other words, was the position that they asked you to confirm that there was an offer made to Mr. Jonas, such as the one that he gave evidence about, and you said there was no such offer, and that was the end of their inquiry to you? Or was there more discussion to try and see whether you knew anything in advance about any offer that was made?
Like I said, the whole period leading up to today, there hasn't been much communication that's been passed my way.
Yes.
We've made numerous requests and still continue to make numerous requests to
Yes.
the law enforcement agencies.
Yes.
To the NPA guys, what's the story, what's the situation? If there's
Yes.
anything,
Yes.
please let us know.
Yes.
We will comply, we'll give you whatever information you need. If there's anything you're investigating, because there's a lot of stuff being thrown around in the
Yes.
public domain, we're here. We understand that's what's being said. Is there anything you need from us? So even up until that point, there was no questioning, there was no interaction of any sort. As a matter of fact, we were asking them prior to the arrest, what is the issue? Can we assist? During the arrest, what is the charge? We were not given that information. Only after the arrest we managed to get sight of, because obviously they needed to present charge sheets and warrants and that sort of thing. And that's why I've decided to take the steps that I've decided to take, because I really want to understand what the issues are, because I haven't had that opportunity to have that conversation. I did not have the opportunity to be questioned. It was just an event that just took me in the direction they wanted to take me, and it ended up the way it did.
Well, I'm asking this question because in his statement and in his evidence, if I recall correctly, Mr. Jonas was very clear that at the meeting, you and Mr. Hlongwane, you might not agree, but it was clear that you and Mr. Hlongwana were very quiet. You said you really didn't take any active role in this discussion that he was having with the member of the Gupta family that he talked about. So I thought that maybe there may be something that, in terms of questioning, that may have come up. But it's fine. Before the commission, we have had persons who have been arrested and charged in circumstances where they have complained that they were being charged in circumstances where there was really no case against them and charges were later withdrawn. And I have said that I want to see what information the police had and what information the prosecutors had on the basis of which they charged those people, because it doesn't matter who you are. If the police have got proper evidence and proper grounds to arrest you, and the prosecutors have got proper grounds and proper evidence to charge you, they should charge you. But equally, it doesn't matter who you are. If they don't have evidence and proper grounds to arrest or to charge, they should not charge. So it's important that the police use their powers properly. Now, I don't know whether in your case or in the case of the others that I've talked about who have come before the commission, whether it was abuse or not abuse. But it's important to simply say, I want to see all of that. So in what I want to see, it will include yours in the light of Mr. Jonas's evidence that you were very quiet at that meeting, you and Mr. Hlongwana. It may well be that there were proper grounds, and it may well be that even if there were no proper grounds, it was just honest, exercise of power, I don't know. But I just want to mention that I will want to see everything. I think that's the end of my clarificatory questions that I had. I see your counsel wants to say something.
Mr. Chair, yes.
Yes.
Just something from our side, not from the witness. Mr. Hubert, who sits next to me, I apologize, was the counsel who represented Mr. Zuma at the time of his arrest. And merely from the bar, just to inform you that Mr. Zuma was never asked for a statement. He did not ever make a warning statement. Apologize. There was no attempt to elicit further information or evidence from Mr. Zuma. He was merely arrested under the act that I read out earlier, the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act of 2004 and the Prevention of Organized Crime Act of 1998. They go by the acronyms of PRECA and POCA. The charge, insofar no charge was ever put, but the reason for the arrest is that Mr. Zuma was apparently present when a bribe was offered to Mr. Jonas, and he did not make a report about that. It is a reportable offence.
Okay.
So that is, it's the inaction that I understand was what the police were after. The supreme irony, of course, being that Mr. Jonas himself did not make such a report until today has refused to cooperate with the police on that point. That merely insofar as that issue is concerned. With your leave, may I ask the witness one final question? It is something that concerns you, Mr. Chairman, and it would have concerned me as well.
Yes.
And perhaps I can just ask the witness a question, just one.
Yeah.
Mr. Zuma, the Gupta residence, can I ask you this? Is it the same as any other ordinary residence? Would you be able to go 5 houses down the line in the same street in Saxonwold and walk in and have a meeting? Or is there anything special? Is the house the residence, the area where you met with Mr. Shlongwane and Mr. Jonas, different from ordinary houses? Or is it just another sitting room, lounge area, of which there are probably millions in Johannesburg?
If there are probably millions in Johannesburg, this would make it the millionth one. So it's just like any other residence.
Were there any
A normal lounge.
other
Is that a
facilities?
second question now? Mr. No.
No,
I granted permission for one.
just to clarify, Chair, it's like any other residence. There's
Yes, nothing special.
nothing special. There's just
Okay, all right.
yeah. There's a
Thank you,
lounge, a
Mr.
normal
Chair.
lounge.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm hoping you're
no
not asking
questions.
for one more.
No questions at all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Zuma, for coming to give evidence and share with the Commission what you know. As I said earlier, there will be further discussion between the Commission's legal team and your legal team. And in terms of that, there may be a need for you to come back. It just depends on the outcome of the discussions that will take place. But thank you very much for coming to give evidence.
Chair, thank you very
Yes.
much for having me. It's an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to be here. I appreciate your fairness, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to put my side of the story across. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and you are now excused. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my colleagues are here ready and eager to proceed with the next
other
business.
witness, the next witness.
But if we may afford them maybe 10 or 15 minutes adjournment for them to be able to
Yes.
properly, place themselves.
Okay, we are at 13 minutes past 12. If we start at 25 past 12, will that do? They say it should be fine.
Should be fine.
We'll adjourn then and resume at 25 past 12. We adjourn.